finally, a UN-supervised referendum on self-determination in accordance with the United Nations Charter, which would include the option of independence. To send a fact-finding mission to Balochistan to independently assess the situation. To get UN observers and monitors into Balochistan to see for themselves, to hear the eyewitness accounts of Baloch people about what is being done to them by the Pakistani state. And again, to ensure that that report is delivered to the General Assembly and the human rights. Then we have to look at ways in which to force Pakistan to come to the negotiating table. And I want to outline today 8 different ways in which we, primarily the Baloch people, but also the wider international community, could do this. The first of these is to press for a halt to Western arms sales to Pakistan. Those Western arms sales in countries like the United States and Britain sustain the armed violence of the state of Pakistan. They are often being given in the name and intention of fighting Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. But in truth, many of those arms are being diverted to suppress the people of Balochistan. So we see that US-supplied F-16 fighter jets and Cobra attack helicopters are being used to indiscriminately bomb Baloch villages, destroying crops and killing civilians and livestock. Now, those arms sales quite clearly violate the Leahy Amendment to the Foreign Assistance Act of the United States, which prohibits Washington from providing weapons to foreign armed forces that engage in human rights violations. So very clearly, in the United States, there needs to be a push to implement the Leahy Amendment to cut off American arms sales to Pakistan, which are being used to abuse the people of Balochistan. Second, there is a moral and legal responsibility on the United Nations itself to appoint a special rapporteur on Balochistan, as they have on many other occasions to oversee, investigate and report on conflict situations. We need that special rapporteur to investigate, to document and to report to the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council on human rights abuses and ethnic discrimination in Balochistan. Third, and equally, the United Nations needs to send a fact-finding mission to Balochistan to independently assess the situation. To get UN observers and monitors into Balochistan to see for themselves, to hear the eyewitness accounts of Baloch people about what is being done to them by the Pakistani state. And again, to ensure that that report is delivered to the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council. Fourth, there needs to be pressure to get Pakistan to lift entry restrictions and permit free access to Balochistan to aid agencies, journalists, and human rights defenders, in order to ensure delivery of aid to the impoverished population. And boy, Balochistan is one of the most impoverished regions in the world today, and also to ensure free media reporting, to allow journalists doing their job and their duty to report the truth about human rights violations in Balochistan. Fifth, there needs to be action to prosecute Pakistan's military and intelligence chiefs who are engaged in authorizing, condoning, and conducting war crimes and crimes against humanity contrary to international humanitarian law. And this includes both action against them via the International Criminal Court or via the Hague Court, or via a UN special tribunal, as set up to examine war crimes and crimes against humanity in the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda. And in particular, those Pakistan military commanders have authorized the military operations which have resulted in the indiscriminate bombing and massacre of Baloch civilians need to be brought to account, to a court of law where they will have a right to defend themselves, but where they will face the charges and the evidence. And this will include the former military dictator Pervez Musharraf, who bears direct personal responsibility for many years of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Sixth, action needs to be taken in the US courts in terms of civil claims by Baloch victims of human rights violations by Pakistani state officials, using the Alien Tort Claims Act. Under this legislation, civil actions can be taken against foreign individuals in the US courts for human rights violations. It has been used in other cases in other countries and should be explored and used in this case as well. Seventh, Western countries need to make Western aid to Pakistan conditional on ending human rights violations. Until Islamabad complies, all Western aid should be withdrawn from the Pakistan government and switched to either local or international aid agencies that conform to international human rights norms. And eighth, we need to think seriously about an international boycott, disinvestment and sanctions campaign targeting government, military and intelligence officials who are implicated in human rights abuses. Not generalized sanctions, disinvestment and boycotts, which would harm ordinary Pakistanis. We have no quarrel with the people of Pakistan, but targeting those leaders, the military, intelligence and state officials who are directly, personally responsible for what is happening in Balochistan today. So those are the 8 potential actions to pressure Pakistan to come to the negotiating table. Finally, I'd just like to outline how we potentially could get, or how the people of Balochistan could get from where they are now to where they want to be. What is the program of concrete, practical action that could move towards a final resolution of the conflict and dispute? And there are 6 ideas, or 6 points. The first one is the call for a ceasefire and a cessation of all military operations, which would include the withdrawal of Pakistani troops and paramilitaries to barracks and a halt to the construction of new military bases and outposts, with independent monitoring and supervision by UN observers and, if necessary, UN peacekeepers on the ground. Second, the release of all political prisoners and a full account of the fate of all disappeared persons from Balochistan. Third, open access to all parts of Balochistan for journalists, aid agencies and human rights organizations. Fourth, the right of return of displaced refugees, the restoration of their property and compensation for losses caused by the conflict. Fifth, to end the inward colonization of Balochistan by non-Baloch settlers. And sixth, and finally, a UN-supervised referendum on self-determination in accordance with the United Nations Charter, which would include the option of independence. If Pakistan has nothing to fear, it will not block a referendum. If Pakistan really believes that the people of Balochistan want to be part of its police state regime, vote. Let them vote and express their will. Now, this may seem far-fetched, but David can defeat Goliath, as the United States learned to its cost in Vietnam. Like all people everywhere, the people of Balochistan have a right to self-determination. It's guaranteed in the United Nations Charter. Pakistan can delay Balochistan's right to self-determination at great financial, moral, political, and reputational cost. But one thing is certain: freedom of Balochistan cannot and will not eventually be denied.
पाकिस्तान में क़याम-ए-अमन के लिए